basic idea of accelerated cascading problem, but using a specific. And we are now there's also a discussion of the accelerated cascading, but I think that, well, in general, you could try to come up with a more general specification of the idea of accelerated cascading, and putting it in such a general way that you can apply it to general problems, even to algorithms, without knowing a specification of the algorithm, and only looking at the work time complexities and the way in which the algorithm in general operates. And that's the purpose of my next presentation of accelerated cascading. We only try to come up with the outlines of the algorithm, how it works in general, and then apply the technique of accelerated cascading to come up with this idea of improving both the work and the time complexity of the algorithm. And so, what's a more general specification of the algorithm we just met? Well, we had an algorithm. Oh, sorry, this is not completely true. This should be an O log n and a O n algorithm, or A, that's capable to reduce the problem of computing the maximum of an array into a problem of half that size. So sorry for that. This should be O log n. That basically was the algorithm that we used on balanced trees. So the balanced tree algorithm operates by constantly reducing level by level the amount of information you operate on. Okay. Then, as an alternative, we have this DLT algorithm, and that's an algorithm B that computes the maximum of an array of n elements. Now, what you would like to do is to combine these two algorithms into an algorithm that's optimal, that computes the maximum in O log n. So here is the idea of applying accelerated cascading. Two algorithms, each differing in time and work complexity profile, and then a requirement, and here the simple requirement is come up with an optimal algorithm, so it should preserve here this O n work complexity, but it should derive its time complexity from the same algorithm. And how to operate. And now I give a general scheme for a solution to that problem, and we apply it to a new example. And so what's the idea? The idea is, well, what you need clearly is a combination of both algorithms. And usually accelerated cascading operates in this way. You apply one algorithm in an iterative way until you find that your resulting data structure is small enough to afford for the application of the non-optimal algorithm. Okay? Here we have an optimal algorithm that can be applied in an iterative way. It constantly halves the number of elements you have to operate on. And finally, you have an algorithm that you can't apply from the beginning because it requires too much work, but you can apply if the amount of data is small enough. So the basic scheme is you apply A for k times until the input size is reduced to a value of m equal to n to the power 2 to the power k, divided to 2 to the power k, and then we apply B to obtain the result. K times A, then B. And now the only thing is that first of all, you need to know what K is, and then you need to compute what the total time work complexity of your combined algorithms, A, K times, and then B. So, we first determine the value of K, and then we determine whether or not the conditions are satisfied. Well, here you have to determine K until you have a satisfactory value of M. So what's this satisfactory value of M? Well, you have to apply algorithm B on the input size M such that M times log n, because then we are applying this algorithm, so we are applying it on the data size of n, so that means m times log m, and m times log m should be less than or equal to n, in order to meet the requirement of optimality. Yeah? So you should not violate this bound. M times log m should be smaller or equal to n. That means, well, m is n divided by 2 to the power k. If we ensure that m is less than or equal to n times log n, then we are satisfying this requirement. Yeah? If this equals n divided by log n, then the log m is surely less than the log n, so then n divided by log n times log n will be less than or equal to O of n. Yeah? Okay. Well, solving k out of this equation and then looking for the minimum value of k that suffices gives you 2 to the power k should be at least as large as log n. Yeah? If you're solving this. N to the power k, the n divided by 2 to the power k less than or equal to n divided by log n means 2 to the power k is at least as large as log n. So that means k equals log n would be the least number that is satisfying this equation. So we try k equals log n. So our basic scheme now is apply this algorithm for log n iterations and then apply the final result. Well, verify whether the conditions hold. Well, applying a for k is log n times results in wn equals on plus on divided by 2 plus etc. until o divided by n to the power k. Well, if you sum this, then of course here you have on and then times 1 plus a half plus 1 divided by 4, etc. This series converges to a constant, so this is the O of n. Yeah? Okay, well, that is the O of log n, because we were applying, of course, here k times this algorithm. Yeah? And each step could be performed in O1. Okay, yeah. Yeah. So the second stage, applying B, results in Wn equals On times log n, and that's n divided by log n times log n, because that's dominated then by this, so that's the O. And finally, we have Tn equals the O of log n, and since m is less than or equal to n, this is the O of log n. Now, if you combine that, so we have the first stage taking the O of n amount of work, and the second stage also taking the O n amount of work, total is the O of n. Amount of time here is the O of log n, and here the amount of time is log n. Yeah? So the total requirement indeed is fulfilled. And now, sorry for that, I have to correct myself again. This, in fact, is correct, but you should look at from a different angle. This, in fact, is derived from the specification of the balanced tree method. But look what it is saying here. We have an O1 algorithm A that's capable to reduce the problem. So not finding the maximum, but the way in which this balanced tree method works is going up level by level. Yeah? In total, there were log n levels. You can, in log n iterations, you can reduce an array by halving it from n to 1. At each level, you are reducing the size of the resulting information by half, but you do that in O1 amount of time and On amount of time. That's derived from the balanced tree. Okay, so this was basically correct, and I made it in the correct state. So this basic idea, so what you are doing in accelerated cascading, that you can connect to the discussions we had before the break. So this is an abstract view of accelerated cascading, and it is a pattern that you can apply to quite a lot of problems. Yeah? Well, to test that, here you have a problem. So we have an O n log n, O log n algorithm for a problem P. Yeah? And B is another algorithm taking O n amount of work and O log n divided by log n amount of time. And that algorithm A is a final algorithm for a problem B, but for a problem P, but B is an information reducing algorithm. It reduces every instance of P with a constant factor C, larger than 1, without changing its solution. Yeah. And now you have to come up with an algorithm that is capable to solve P with an O n amount of work. So here is the, if you compare this, you see that B is taking less amount of work, and an O log n amount of time. Yeah. So this is an idea of improving algorithm A. Now, the idea here, of course, is B should be used in the iterative phase and A in the final phase. But here you see that you can't apply A initially. You need B because here you need O n log n amount of work. Yeah? So A can be applied after the instance of size n is reduced with the help of B to a size m equals to n divided by work. Yeah? So if you have an exercise like this, always use these, this idea, express your final data structure that you can afford to apply this final algorithm A to in terms of a new size, and this is the size m equals n divided by log n. Yeah. Why? Well, if you have m equals n divided by log n, then your work complexity is okay. Yeah. So, well, if you have m is equal to n divided by log n, you know how to achieve m. You can achieve m by applying this algorithm iteratively. So m, in fact, is the result of k times applying this algorithm B, and that ensures that m equals n divided by c to the power k after k iterations. And now you can solve k out of this equation, because now n divided by c to the power k should be equal to n divided by log n. And then here again we have the equation k should be equal to log n, and therefore k equals log n. Sometimes you have to solve k quite exactly. If you take k well, too liberal, then you might not be able to satisfy the requirements. But in most cases you can take, you don't need to solve k in a very exact way. So you can be very liberal on that. So k equals log log. That's the first phase of accelerated cascading. Now we know the basic structure of the algorithm. We have to apply the algorithm B for log log n times, and then we can apply A. And now the second phase comes, and that's the verification phase. Now we have to make sure that by this number of iterations we indeed come up with an algorithm that satisfies the requirements. Well, apply B k times. Consider that as an algorithm. That will cost you, well, an amount of work equal to O n in the first iteration, O n divided by c in the second iteration, O n divided by c to the power 2 in the third, in the third iteration, etc. Yeah? So finally, we end up with ON plus ONC plus ON divided by log n. That, summing up, gives you the O of n. Again, because C is larger than 1. C larger than 1 gives you the right to come up with a series that converges to a constant. 1 plus 1 divided by C plus 1 divided by C squared, etc. Then, the amount of time we need is O of log n divided by log n. Then O n log of n divided by 2 divided by log n divided by 2, etc. Until the final term, O log n divided by c to the power k divided by log n divided by c to the power k. Well, this can be easily seen as dominated by the O of log n. Why? Well, it's very simple. The sum of this term is dominated by log n times the O of log n divided by log n. Every term here following log n divided by log n is dominated by log n divided by log n. If you have log n of those terms, then you have log n times log n divided by log n, and that's the O of log n. Yeah? And please be very careful in summing up these logarithms. You can't often not apply this trick of conversion series in this way. So the additional cost for applying A after this is T is the O of log n. That was the algorithm A, so that's the O of log n. And W is the O of m times log n. Well, m equals n divided by log n, so this means n divided by log n times log n. M is smaller than n, so that effectively means the O dominated by the O of n. And again, we need here the criteria, because now we see that work is at most On, here in the second phase 2, and time is at most log n, and that's C2. But please be also aware that sometimes you think that you should come up with an exact answer here of the time complexity, but often that's not required. The only thing you have to verify is here the final requirement. So it might come out that your final algorithm, your final combination, is doing even better than it. Yeah? But don't bother about it. Only try to verify the final requirement. And you should be very keen in being able to follow this recipe in coming up with a solution to accelerated cascading. Yeah, because you know that it's very easy for me to come up with a variation on this scheme. Okay, so clear? So the total cost of the algorithm is O log n, W is On, and that gives a final result. I added a simple slide for, again, giving you a simple proof of why the O of log n divided by log n until, etc., log n c, log n c equals log n, and that's why this domination of each of the terms by log n divided by log n, and given the fact that there are only log n of these terms. Okay. Let's discuss, and well, maybe this is, given the time, our last subject, and I have to postpone cemetery breaking to the next lecture. But let's now discuss the technique of pipelining. I think that, well, pipelining might be familiar to you already, and it is a very general technique for, well, ensuring that a naive algorithm that will cost you the product of two time factors can be converted in an algorithm that will cost you only the sum of two time factors. So what you effectively do is you have a task, and that task is split in a number of subtasks. And these subtasks have to be performed sequentially, but since there is a number of tasks, we try to process them as concurrently as we can. So here you have the basic setup. There are n tasks to be executed. Each task consists of a series of subtasks that have to be performed in a sequential way. But since there are n of those tasks, we try to perform concurrency as follows. Suppose that we have specialized algorithms an until an, and these are specialized to the subtasks. So, for example, algorithm A1 is capable of performing the first subtask of every task. A2, the second subtask, and AM, the last subtask. And here I have a simple example. Suppose that you have task T1 consists of 4 subtasks, T2 and T3, and now A1 is capable of performing the first subtask here, A2 second subtask, A3 third task, and A4 the final task. Yeah? Okay, what would be a naive way of solving the problem of processing these tasks? Well, perform A1 to the first subtask of the first task, then the first subtask of the second task, third subtask, the first subtask of the third task, etc. Then hand over to A2, do the same, then hand over to A3, and then hand over to A4. That will cost you roughly, if we take each subtask to take a constant amount of time, the product of the number of tasks and the number of subtasks. Isn't it? Yeah? If you have n tasks, each task taking a constant time, for example, and you have m subtasks, then we need m times n for the total processing. But we can do, of course, it in a much smarter way. What we do is, at time t is 1, we assign algorithm A1 to the first subtask of the first task. Yeah? And as soon as A1 is ready, we perceive that A2 can start. We don't have to wait until all the tasks have been performed. Yeah? So what we do is we give A1 the first subtask of the second task, and A2 already the second subtask of the first task. Yeah? And we continue, and then we give A1 the first task, the subtask of the third task, and now A3 can start with the third subtask of the first task, and so on. So what we finally have, and now here, okay. Oh yeah. So here now A4 is ready to start. What we finally achieve here is that after m minus 1 of these subtasks and tasks and n subtasks, we have been able to complete all the tasks. So instead of a product of m times n, we have reduced the complexity to OM plus OM. Okay? And that's the basic idea of pipeline. Reducing complexity from a multiplicative factor to an additive factor. Okay, so the general picture here is for n tasks and m subtasks per task, and OT time per subtask. Without pipelining, we need OM times n times t, and now we need OM plus n times t. Yeah? Okay. So that idea we would like to apply also in parallel processing on data structures. And well, maybe that some of you already are acquainted with it, but well, we will simply give a very brief rehearsal of a data structure called 2-3 trees. 2-3 trees are very popular in storing information and in searching for information. It's a simple extension of a binary tree. Now, having for each node not 2, but at least at most 3 children. And well, what we would like to discuss is the problem of inserting information in a 2-3 tree. The basic idea is that, well, if you do it on a serial computer, then you can prove that inserting a single data element in the tree of n data elements will cost you the O of log. The basic idea is very simple. The cost of inserting is dependent upon the height of the tree. Yeah. And the height of the tree, we can prove, is dependent on the log of n. If you have a very naive approach to inserting less than n data elements, but well, close to n is also possible, then that would cost you k times log n time. Yeah. So if k is approximately equal to n, it would cost you n log n time to insert such a data element. And now we can improve that approach, and we do it in phases. So, knowing that we might apply some basic ideas from pipelining, we first ensure that we can model the system as performing tasks that consist of subtasks. And the way to do that requires some clever manipulation, but we will ensure that, well, without pipelining, we can improve from k times log n to log k times log n. So that would mean that now, if k equals approximately n, we end up with a log squared n for inserting in a 2-3 data tree. Well, then, recognizing the pipelining case, we can improve further by now replacing the multiplication factor, log k times log n, into an additive factor. And that turns out to give us a log k plus log n, where k is less than n, so a log n algorithm for inserting in a 2-3. So the basic idea of this part, this final part, is we should discuss what a 2-3 tree is. We should discuss the naive approach of inserting data elements. It's simply extending your serial algorithm, but you should know now, by following this course, that simply extending serial algorithms to a parallel case is a very bad idea in general. Yeah. Then we improve and we discuss a truly parallel algorithm, and we apply, well, so to say, pipelining approach as a kind of post-processing approach to come up with a very elegant log n time algorithm for inserting at most n elements to the 2-3. Okay, so what's 2-3-3? Well, every internal node has 2 or 3 children. Here we have a case. Furthermore, every path from the root to a leaf has the same length, h. So the number of leaves satisfies 2 to the power h less than the number of leaves less than your number of leaves, and that's less than 3 to the power h. And that means that h, if the number of leaves equals n, is the theta log. So it's truly equal to log n. If you have to search for an element in such a 2-3 tree, then you use the labels for the internal nodes of such a tree. And for every such an internal node, we use two labels, and these are called LV for left of and M for middle of V. And left of V gives you the maximum of the value of the leaves in the leftmost subtree of V, and MV gives you the maximum of the value of the leaves in the second left subtree. So if you have 3, it is the middle tree. Yeah? So to give you a simple example, suppose that here we have the data elements 3, 5, 9, 11, 12, and 21. Then 3, 5 would be the label of the left and the label of the middle. Yeah. 9, 11 here for left and middle, and 12 and 21 for left and middle, and here 5, 11 also for left and middle. Yeah? Because here 11 is the largest element in the middle, and 5 is the largest element in the left. So, okay. Now the basic idea of inserting elements into 3 trees that you would like to preserve the structure of the tree. Yeah? So inserting elements should not destroy the way in which you are used to find information. Now, suppose that you have a new data element 7 and you have to plug it into an existing 2, 3 tree. And here you have the 2, 3 tree. So it's very easy to come up with the final destination of 7, because now you compare it with the first element, you know that's less than 9, so if it would occur whenever it has been placed in a 2, 3 tree, it should occur before in the leftmost tree. Yeah? So you descend here, so you end up here with the path, you know that this is larger than 4, so it should occur here in the middle. Yeah? So between 4 and 9. And you are happy because now 7 can be simply added to this parent, because a parent is allowed to have more than 2 children. Yeah? Okay, but we also have to take care for more unhappy cases, because now number 8 arrives, and now you have to assign a place to number 8. Of course you can find a place for 8, but that violates the bound on the number of children that is allowed for the node 4, 7. Yeah? Okay, what to do about this? Well, what you do is simply split the parent node into 2 nodes. So basically what you're doing now is you, what's often the case in such circumstances is that you replace, or you refer the problem to another level. So first we have a problem of inserting 8 here into this place. Well, now you say, well, we can solve that problem by splitting this node into 2 nodes. And again, here we have 4, 7 for this node and 8, 9 for this node. But now we have a problem on another level. Yeah? Because now we have a problem because this root now has, again, 4 children. Yeah? So you're solving a problem here on the lowest level, and, well, you don't take care for the problem that might occur at a higher level. Yeah? This higher level is to solve for its own problems. Well, this higher level can solve for this problem again by doing the same trick. It splits the root now into 2 nodes. Yeah? Here is, and then restores the values, and of course ends up with providing another root. And so what the insertion of a single data element might do is either provide a new 2, 3 tree of the same height, or cause an increase of the tree with 1. Yeah? But anyway, now you should have a basic feeling for the complexity of insertion. If you look at insertion, you know that at each level we are doing at most a constant number of operations. Because by the way of these guides, we know exactly how to travel to the final layer. in the final layer, we either are happy, we include the node, or we split the node. Takes constant amount of time. And now we are going up in the tree. Well, how many levels are there in the tree? That's the O of log n. And by doing a constant amount of operations at each level, you end up with the total cost of insertion of O of log n. Yeah. So, we come to the conclusion that a single insert, and by the way, delete, gives you an O(n) cost per level, so that means an O log n of the time needed for performing insertion of a single node. And this we call an inherently sequential single insertion algorithm. Why it is inherently sequential? Well, you have to go down in the tree in a sequential way, and you have to go up in a sequential way. And you have to follow the structure of your data structure. Okay. Well, very naively, doing k insertions will cost you, for this inherently sequential insertion algorithm, a time k times log n, and that's the O of k log n. What we will do is we try to improve by reducing this k to log k. And we will arrive at an algorithm that finally will achieve the O of log n for k insertions, where k of course is bounded then by n, and an amount of work of k times log n. Okay, we do that in steps. So first we will try to find a parallel algorithm for doing many insertions at the same time. What we simply do is we imagine that the data elements that have to be inserted are ordered. B1, B2, B3, Bk. Well, you might wonder now why I'm allowed to come up with an already sorted array of data elements. Well, I can guarantee you that there are parallel algorithms that are able to sort an array of this size k less than n elements in log n. So this doesn't affect the total complexity. Yeah? So we simply can assume that the data elements already are ordered. Since we have ordered them, we can take care for the first element and for the last element. And we insert the first element and we insert the last element. And the reason for doing that, so for paying attention to these two in particular, is that, well, for the remaining ones, B2 to Bk minus 1, we would make sure that there always exists an interval in the existing tree such that one element in the existing tree is a lower bound and one is an upper bound for an element to be inserted. Yeah? So if B1 is inserted first and then Bk is inserted, then for the remaining ones we are sure that there exists always an interval in the resulting 2, 3 tree where we can place the remaining elements. Yeah? They are always bounded by these so-called sentinels. Yeah? Okay, so that's the reason for doing it. And now we will find in parallel the leaf intervals AI plus 1, so the successive leaf intervals where these new elements have to be placed. So for every Bj, we will find in parallel where AI and AI plus 1 are located. And we can do that by parallel looking up in the 2, 3. Yeah? Okay. Now, let for I be equal from 1 to k, Bi, the sequence of Bj's to be inserted in a given leaf interval AI and AI plus 1. And again, I will tell you we can be happy and we can be very unhappy. Why could we be happy and why could we be unhappy? Well, if you look at this phase, we know that, well, first inserting here two elements will cost you O log n time O log n work. Right? And finding in parallel the leaf intervals also will cost you O log n amount of time and OK times log n amount of work. Yeah? Okay. But now you might be confronted with a very worst case situation that there is one leaf interval where all the elements you have to insert have to be inserted in the tree. That would be a very unlucky case. Because, well, if we have the case 1, then the number of elements we have to insert for every leaf interval is less than or equal to 1. Yeah? So there are some leaves in leaf intervals where we have to insert an element, and there are leaf intervals where we don't. Then we are very lucky. Then the insertions are distributed over the leaf intervals. Yeah? And that means that in a distributed way, we also can insert them in the tree. Because what then happens is we apply the sequential single insertion algorithm. And we can do that in parallel. Why? Well, suppose here we have the situation that here we have the leaf intervals AI minus 1, AI plus 1. Yeah? And here is AI plus 2. Now, they all belong here to a single parent. Yeah? Bj has to be inserted here, Bj plus 1 to be inserted there, and Bj plus 2 inserted here. What we end up is, if the number of to be inserted nodes here is bounded by 1 above, then the total number of nodes you have to insert here under a given parent is always less than or equal to 6. Yeah? So for a given node here, the parent node, by inserting these nodes, you never have the case that there are seven or more nodes that you have to insert suddenly for a given parent. And that's important because that means that you can resolve any conflict here at a higher level in a constant amount of time, since one split is sufficient to resolve the conflict. Yeah? You have 3 allowed to have 3 children per parent. So a split here of this parent node into 2 nodes is already sufficient for resolving that case. Yeah? Okay. And then we can go on. So if you do that in this case, we say that there is a simple parallel insertion algorithm. That's a small modification of the sequential case where we can afford inserting all the elements. So if that would be the case, then you don't have to bother anymore, because at higher levels everything is okay and you could perform a higher up with a, you could find a simple extension of your sequential algorithm by performing this simple parallel insertion. Okay. But that means that we are left with a more difficult case, and that is that for some I, ki is larger than 1. So then you have a big problem, because then it might occur that there is a huge number of nodes you have to insert in between 2 leaves. And what you do here is you remember the order of those nodes. So in every of those orderings there is a middle element. And you take that middle element in all those nodes that have to be inserted and you insert it first. What will happen is that now there is an additional node inserted in between 2 leaf nodes, and effectively the remaining number of nodes, so ki minus 1 nodes, are distributed over a left interval and over a right interval. So you have reduced your resulting problem to a problem that now contains only half of the elements to be inserted. So, after doing that, so after inserting your middle element, now you have a case where Bi is split into two halves, B1i and B2i, and these have to be processed. Well, you repeat this procedure in the same way on the reduced subsequences. So you have B1i, B2i, B log ki, and every time you apply this procedure, you are halving. That means that you can effectively insert it in log n number of iterations. If you have n numbers to be inserted, and each time you are halving your number to be inserted, you need log n iterations. So after log n iterations, at most, case 1 applies. You only have one element to be inserted. Okay. So, this is the simple parallel idea to insert this number of elements. This will ensure that in O log k times log n, due to this halving procedure, we will be able to insert all the elements. It will cost you O log k times log n amount of time, and OK times log n amount of work. Well, this is a nice reduction in time, of course, but we are not satisfied. Because now, and you should now already be able to see how we can apply pipeline. So, do you see how we could apply pipelining by following this procedure? So what are we doing effectively? Well, what we did is we paid attention to the number of elements we had to insert in every leaf interval. Yeah? Well, we took the middle elements and we processed them upwards until you have a new 2, 3 trees, and then we bother again by these halved elements, the number of elements. But of course, we don't have to wait until all the elements have ultimately be processed until the root is affected. And because once you have processed one level, you already can do the same on the lower level. So you are ready for the next processing step, taking half the number of elements on the lower levels. So basically, the idea is the pipelining should apply to the levels of the tree. So a basic insertion algorithm is nothing more than a sequential number of subtasks. For each level, there is a subtask in the tree. And these subtasks have to be performed sequentially. Pipelining is the idea that once you have completed a certain sublevel, you are ready for processing the next task. Next task here is, well, inserting, bothering about the remaining elements on the lowest level. Pipelining gives you an opportunity to replace multiplication by addition. Multiplication means log k times log n can be replaced by log k plus log n. Log n, m was the number of subtasks. Here, k is the number of subtasks. Okay. So, the total complexity of the improved manifold insertion was log k times log n, wn stay k times log n, and here we see how we can apply the pipelining by considering each level as performing a special operation. There's an algorithm that is able to perform a part of the insertion algorithm. And that gives you the idea of reducing k times log n to log n plus log n, remembering that k is less than n, gives you an O log n and such. And sorry for taking so much time. I will use that.